Welcome back to part 2 of the Forgotten Outdoors podcast with Joe Andreasen. So if you're stumbling upon this, go listen to part 1 because we'll be referencing it. But we talked a lot about birding, and Thomas and I have a lot more questions because we didn't realize that there was so much into it. Where we kind of left off, I guess, is where we can kind of start back into it. Where Joe, he was saying, it's like, oh yeah, what was the owl's name again?
Oh, the flammulated owl.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, like I like to listen to, I like to locate it by like calling it.
Yeah.
So let's start there.
How does that work?
Let's all say it together. Calling. No.
Calling.
Calling.
So, yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to be careful with calling in birds, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You just sometimes you can do it with your voice if you're good enough. Most birds I can't call them in with my voice or whistle or anything like that. But if you bring like a speaker out and you get on your app with all of the bird calls on it, you can play it, and sometimes the bird will come in. It almost forces you to be like a better naturalist because sometimes of the year certain calls won't work. Sometimes of the year they will. So you just kind of need to know like what the bird's goal is and what that call socially incites in the bird's mind. And like if it's a territory call, like, hey, get out of my territory, you don't want to do that.
Right.
If your goal is to call the bird in. And with owls, it's especially like it's almost a little bit of like a controversial topic among birders because owls are notoriously flighty when it comes to like scaring them off of a nest or something like that. So like if they have chicks, you usually don't want to try calling them in because it'll freak them out. And like they're like, oh, I thought I chose a spot where there weren't any other owls that were going to bother me. And so sometimes they'll abandon a nest and then the eggs die or something like that. So that's not good. You usually need to kind of know what you're doing if you're going to call in some owls. And I usually only do it like right at the beginning of spring when all the owls especially the migrating owls, are just starting to get on territory, starting to do their calls. Because then they'll come in and investigate. And they'll be like, oh, who else is here? Do I need to fight them? Do I need to leave because they're bigger than me? So they'll come in and check it out. And sometimes if you do like a female call, sometimes they're more distinctive. Like a male will have a certain call and the female will have a different one. And so the females, you can like play that call and then a male will come in, or vice versa. And so that tends to work pretty good. With the flammulated owls, that's really the only way that I can find them is I'll get up in the spring, right when the snow's starting to melt, like right when the pines and the aspens start mixing. That's a really good elevation.
Yeah.
Right when the aspens start growing, that's a really, really good elevation for them. And then you just go, there's like a 1 month window where it's like okay to call them in, and then you call them in, and it's usually a pretty good experience if you go to the right places. A really good one is like American Fork Canyon, AF
And that's
Canyon.
in Utah?
Yeah, it's in Utah County, just north of Provo. That's a really good spot, and some of the canyons in Salt Lake are really good spots for them. You just got to get to a certain elevation, play the call. Sometimes you got to sit there for like a half hour. Like I've sat an hour and not heard anything. The cool thing is there's a lot of birds that are making noise at night during that time. So like sometimes when I'm looking for flammulated owls, I'll get northern saw-whet owls, and ruffed grouse will do their like drumming beat. Oh, man.
It's like somebody's like trying to start up an old diesel engine or something.
That's like,
hasn't ran.
That's one of the coolest bird sounds.
You feel it like in your chest.
Yeah, you don't even like
that.
hear it almost. It's like you're hearing it with your like throat, like in your chest kind of. It's just like oh.
So cool.
Yeah, that's a cool one. But
So
those.
I guess my question then is, are you like what's the most popular type of call that you're using? Like in the hunting community, it's like pretty much you're just doing, I don't know, I would say the most popular is like basically mating calls, but I mean
kind
of. But
of.
you can do little cow calls and you can do little chirps and stuff like that, but I feel like, the most common time to use calls is basically during mating season, whether or not you make mating
especially for
calls.
like elk and like big game animals, like that's when you're going to get your best shots is like for elk, for instance. And we're making this parallel kind of going in the rabbit hole because like we call a lot in hunting.
Yeah.
And so like when you're hunting big game, elk per se, it's like we're archery hunting. It's September. The elk are going into rut. Like the bulls are looking for cows. The cows are making certain cow noises of when they're in estrus.
Yeah.
When they're ready to breed, and that gets the bulls riled up. And so you can take different approaches there. Or you're trying to mimic a cow elk that's in estrus.
Yeah.
So the bulls want to come and do their thing.
Pass on the seed.
Or you want to act like a bull that has cows, and there's another bull that wants to come and fight you. Or you want to act like a weaker bull that might have some cows, and so the dominant bull is going to be like, I'm going to steal his cows. So like, but yeah, it's kind of focused around that breeding time. And same with
so
like,
maybe that's the better question then. Is like time of year, is it usually around like a breeding, or is it like more of it's a nesting phase, so we're going to do territory? Like what's the most popular
that's a good
type
question.
or season of calling for birds?
It's the birds are usually most likely to respond to audio if it's mating season.
Mm-hmm.
So
it translates.
Yeah, what you're explaining was very similar. Like sometimes you want to do a male call so that the males will come in and check it out. Sometimes you want to do a female call. So so like great horned owls, I can get a male great horned owl to come in almost every time I play a female call. They have this weird it almost sounds like a cat, like meowing really aggressively, like that the female great horned owls make, and I can get a male to come in if I'm in a good habitat almost
cool.
every time. So that's kind of a parallel that I think is really, really coincides with hunting. Outside of the breeding season, there's only certain species that respond to calls and audio, mostly like chickadees, jays, some hawks.
So, I mean, you just saying hawks for some reason. I'm thinking about this now. So, like, also we use like distress calls for predatory hunting. So, for a predatory bird, can that be something that you use as well, or not so much?
In theory, yes. In practice, I haven't noticed that working very well. There are signs, though, that you can use. So, like, if I'm looking for... If I'm seeing a bunch of really small birds that I know are prey for, like, a specific type of hawk, like a sharp-shinned hawk, and then all of a sudden I notice these birds that are all being really loud get really quiet and start hiding away, I know to look up and see if I can find a hawk. So there's, like, cues that you can use from, like, that predator-prey relationship. Usually the calling doesn't really bring in the predators, though.
Gotcha.
Because I think it's just because they're less prevalent. Like, it would just be way harder, and they're pretty choosy. They're also, I mean, a bear, for example, is very dependent on, like, its hearing and its smell, whereas hawks are...
Sight.
They just use their sight. And so if you start making a call, they'll look at you from like 3 miles away before you can see them, and they're like, oh, it's a human again.
He's got his binoculars out.
It's a birder.
This idiot.
Freaking
Not going in there. So yeah, I mean, they like to use their sight a little bit more, so it's harder to... Most predatory birds, it's like they happen to be seen when they want to be seen. Like, it's hard to go out looking for predatory birds unless they're just like already around.
That brings up a question in my mind. So birds are more, sight for sure. And like hunting, sight kind of takes a back burner on a lot of big game animals.
Oh, yeah.
Like ducks are different. Ducks are different
ears.
And turkeys are different. It's a lot of sight for those guys, but it's smell, it's sound for those guys. So my question then is, do birders ever get into like camouflage type of stuff so that like they're not seen by those birds? Because I mean, we do it in hunting, so that like we're not seen by the animal, but really like scent and sound are bigger factors for them. So do guys get crazy in like ghillie suits and stuff?
Yes. Short answer is yes. Long answer is, I mean,
The question is, do you?
Yeah, I know that's what everybody's really wondering. I don't, but I'm not against the idea. I just haven't ever been like, you know what, I really need camo. I've never
paint my face, become the tree.
Yeah,
become the bird.
I know birders that are that way. A lot of them are wildlife photographers that are birders. Like, I knew a guy down in Utah. Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge. He made his own ghillie suit to match the grass or the marshland that's out there, and he would like go out at like midnight and just like camp out until sunrise. And his big thing was he really wanted to get a picture of a yellow-headed blackbird, but he wanted to see the like smoke coming from its mouth as it sang, like the puff of steam from its mouth as it sang in the morning, and so he would have to like be completely still from the very first light, and so he'd use the ghillie suit. But I know other people that use camouflage. Most of the time, birding is a little bit more of a casual experience, and so we don't wear it. But like a lot of people will avoid wearing like the big sun hats because like you turn your head and that's a big motion. Yeah. So we try to stick to like baseball caps, kind of more neutral colors. Birds are really sensitive to like blue colors. So if you wear like a bright blue shirt, that's usually not a great idea. But you're still going to see some birds if you wear a bright blue shirt. Like you just might not see that one that's really elusive. Right. You know what I mean?
I feel like probably in general, most of those birds aren't feeling the pressure like a lot of the big game or stuff that we hunt do, especially during the time of year.
And the species of birds that are under pressure, those are the ones that you really want to start wearing camo for. You know what I mean? So, but you know, most birding trips, you don't need it. So,
gotcha.
So my question is, what bird were you most excited to find? Like, what's like
one that I've already found?
Yeah, your current like. This one is elusive.
That was one of my last questions on the one that I never asked. Yeah.
Oh man.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I'm just saying. I thought of it too.
What's the rarest bird that you've already seen, or like
your favorite?
Yeah, your favorite. Maybe both. Like, what's the rarest, and then what's your favorite?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that go into making a good bird a good bird. Sometimes it's like the experience surrounding the seeing of the bird. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be that rare to have a really cool experience with the bird. One that I think of, this is a little bit of a story. Are you ready?
Let's
so saddle up.
Okay, here we go. There is a bird that is native to the Himalayan mountains called the Himalayan snowcock. It kind of looks like a pheasant, except a little bit bigger. And some eccentric rich person in the 70s decided he wanted to transplant a population of Himalayan snowcocks to North America, and the place that he decided to put them was the Ruby Mountains in northeastern Nevada. For hunting purposes, he wanted to shoot them, and he wanted to have a population that he could hunt. And these were really high. For anybody that's been to Elko, Nevada, those are the giant snow-capped mountains that you see from Elko. Are the Ruby Mountains, and they are spectacular. So me and my brother-in-law, we thought, let's try this out. Let's try to find a Himalayan snowcock in the Ruby Mountains. And it's kind of like a one of those birds that birders talk to each other about with like a level of reverence, because it's like a trip. Like you can't just happen upon a Himalayan snowcock.
Yeah.
And so you have to like plan a trip to this very specific kind of small mountain range that's really high elevation, really hard to get into. And so we planned 3 days of backpacking to try and find this Himalayan snowcock. And we got like 30-pound packs, and we're hiking up in these mountains, and they're just different than the mountains that you're used to seeing in the Rockies. Like, it's just really steep cliffs that just go on forever in these mountains. It's really cool. And we looked for day one. I think we got there around lunchtime, and we did like 2 summits the first day. Couldn't find them. And another thing about these Himalayan snowcocks is they're from the Himalayas, and so they need a certain elevation to survive. It just so happens that elevation is only like at the very, very peaks of these mountains on the Rubies. In the Himalayas, they're a lot higher, and so they can stay at lower elevations up there. Well, they're the same elevation, really, but they're not like at the tips
lower
of the mountains.
On the mountain.
Yeah, but in the Rubies, they have to stay way, way up there. And so, but since they're so cliffy, is that a word?
Sure,
so many cliffs.
It is now.
It's hard to get up and find them. Yeah. Cliffy mountains. It's hard to like get right up next to one of these birds because it's just hard to summit these mountains. So we did a couple passes that first day, didn't see anything. saw a lot of cougar sign. And the second day, we spent the whole day looking. We're like all over these mountains. I think we did like 13 miles the second day, and it was like, I don't know, something like 10,000 feet of elevation difference, like gain and loss throughout the day. And we had one last spot we wanted to try, so we went there in the evening and camped there. It was a little lake, and the mountains kind of made like this amphitheater. It was super cool. And my brother-in-law was like panicking that we weren't going to see this bird, and so he woke up at like 3 a.m. and was just out, just like listening for him. And I was sleeping, and then all of a sudden at like 5 a.m, he's like shaking me awake, and he's like, I found him, I heard him. And it's like dark outside, and I was just like, okay. So I get up, and I'm like wearing these like long johns and like sandals, and I have terrible eyesight, so I have these like big gross glasses on. I didn't have time to get my contacts in, and I just have my, you know, my glasses, my long johns, and my sandals, and we're like hiking up a mountain at 5 a.m. And we're just like freaking out because we think we're not going to see this bird that we like planned this whole trip around. And we get way up there and the sun's rising, and it was just like this amazing, beautiful experience because it's like great weather, sun's rising, you can see him on these mountains, and we're just sitting there super quiet for like an hour listening for this bird. And then we hear like one little thing, like way up in the top, this little beep, and we're like, was that it? I think that was it. And we hear it one more time, and my brother-in-law is just like, he's like, yes, that's it, we saw it. And it was pretty distinctive. Like, we could have counted it right there, but we wanted to get a look at it. So we stayed like another hour, didn't get a good look. And we come down, we're like hiking down this mountain, and we run into these people, and I'm in my long johns, my sandals, and like, you know, I'm just like looking like a lunatic coming down from this mountain. And there's like a group of like 20 birders with like their spotting scopes all set up, and they're like, did you see him? And I'm like, no, we heard him though. And they're like, you want to look through we got like 6 of them in the scope. And I was just like, oh my gosh, these guys probably woke up in Elko that morning and like had some guided tour, some guy that they're like paying money to show them exactly where they're at. He's keeping tabs on them and stuff. And so we look through them and we're like, oh yeah, there they are. And it was pretty cool. But that was like, as far as like chases go, that was like one of the best experiences. And the Himalayan snowcock is like, I've seen prettier birds than the Himalayan snowcock, but like as far as like rewarding experiences, that was awesome. And like you guys probably know this from hunting, but it's sometimes if you like see it too quick, it like cheapens the experience.
Oh yeah,
we talk about that all the time. It'd be too easy. Like if we saw one right now, it would just be too easy.
It's like maybe I shouldn't even pull the trigger.
Yeah, we've done that.
I haven't had the experience yet, you know, and so that's kind of how that trip was. It was really rewarding, but it was super tough. Like we were dead afterwards. I didn't know if I could make it to that last spot where we were gonna look, because it was just like I've had this 30-pound, like my arms are gonna fall off because my pack has been. So that was pretty cool. But I mean, yeah, I have a couple different cool bird stories that, you know, someday we could talk about. But and I mean, just looking at my list, like 200 and something, what did I say, 270 something birds, like I can tell you exactly where I saw every single one of those. Because the experience is so, like, I don't think there's anything that can tie you to a place more closely than like a wildlife sighting. You know, like you guys probably remember like the first time you saw like an elk or a deer. Like, I mean, you just can't forget it, and you can like draw back the smells and the sights and how the air felt and like who you're with. Like,
well, and it's hilarious. Like, so my family, we do a deer hunting trip every year. So we've gone for a lot of years. My dad went when he was a kid, and so like now he's got 20, 30 years of hunting in the same spot.
yeah.
And so every year, it doesn't matter how many times we go. Every year we're driving. He's like, oh, this is where so-and-so shot this deer. And, oh, this is where so-and-so shot this deer. And then, and, you know, now I've gone enough times to where I've shot enough deer where I'm like, yep, this is my very first deer I ever shot was right here. This was my biggest deer I've ever shot was right here. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool, though. Like, 270-something is crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's why it's kind of fun, you know, like we have, you know, our trophies and our antlers and hides and things and a pile of antlers that you can't see in the camera there and things like that. Just
But those attach us to the memory.
Yeah, like every time I look at that buck, I know exactly what was going through my mind during that whole experience. You know, like I could draw back on that experience and remember my thought process, remember the steps that deer took and how he was looking at me through this big old brush, you know, and I could just see his face and he was looking at me and I was at full draw with my bow and starting to get all shaky because it was like 2 minutes of this stare down with this buck and I'm like, I move and he's gone, you know. It's like I remember that like every time I see that. Yeah. And so just those experiences, I mean, that's what keeps us going out there, really. Yeah. You know, it's like we have, for us, I'm kind of relating it back to hunting. It's like, yes, we like to go out and fill the freezer with meat. That's a big thing for us. But those experiences, you know, of going out there and interacting with the wildlife. And, you know, you were painting this whole story, and I'm glad that you did, of like, we were going up there and you were talking about what you were wearing and how the sun was coming up and like the weather, the amphitheater. It's like all those elements make this incredible experience that you can draw back on. Yeah. And that's what keeps you going out because you want more experiences like that.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know. I imagine it's similar with birding, but like for us, we're big on firsts. Like, yeah. Like Ben always makes a joke about my bear because he always says it's tiny, but
it's not a lie.
But you know,
almost the same size as that coyote.
Yeah, let's
beaver pelt over there.
That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is so like it was the first bear, so it was like I have to commemorate this. And so I think it's cool that like for you with birding, like you have a book of every bird, and in my mind I'm like, man, I should have done something like this. Like even every animal, like just to put a date next to it and, you know, write what kind it was, like that's cool. I think that's a cool thing to kind of incorporate maybe into the hunting world, into the fishing world. Like I had an old coworker and he sent me a picture and he's like, first time catching this type of a fish on a fly rod. Yeah. And I was like, that's dope. And it was like I think it was a smallmouth bass. Yeah. And he just never caught one on a fly rod. Yeah. And so he was like, but he's been fishing forever. He's probably caught smallmouth bass with like a regular rod, but just not with a fly fishing rod. And so like that's just cool. So I think that's sweet.
Yeah. Firsts.
I think one of the best thing you can do if you're thinking like listening and thinking, hey, I want to get into birding. This is something that sounds kind of cool. Just like write down, get the app or get a book that has like actual up-to-date scientific names of all these birds and just like the up-to-date common names and just start writing down all the ones that you think you've seen. Just go through the book species by species and be like, oh yeah, I've seen a robin before. That's pretty easy, you know? Oh, I think I've seen a house finch. Those are in the Walmart parking lot. Right? Or yeah, house finch, house sparrow, both of those are in Walmart parking lots. So I'll just write those down. Magpie, everybody's seen a magpie. So like, I remember when I first did that, I was like 18 and I had like 35 species. And I was like, that's pretty dang good, you know?
That's
like
just getting into it.
Ones that I like wasn't even actively searching for birds, and that was how many I wrote down. Probably because I just lived in a good place for birds, but like anybody can, you know, get in the teens, in the 20s, you know, for birds that, you know, you didn't even know you'd seen. And then once you get out looking, that's just, I mean, I love taking people out that are just getting into birding. And if anybody wants to, I mean, hit me up. Let's go birding.
Yeah, this is your opportunity for a plug. So if you've got like a social media handle, this is your chance.
Yeah, I don't know if I should announce it, but I'm thinking about doing a birding podcast.
Yes.
If this goes well, if I'm okay at it.
Yes.
I mean, Thomas tried to derail us back there, but we got back on track.
Just because I wanted to talk about my cool bear. That no one likes or appreciates.
So
you appreciate it. That's what matters.
Yeah, hey, there you go. As long as you're happy. So, yeah, I mean, I already have a Twitter for it. It's called the Birder Dad. Part of me is kind of taking like the Birder Dad focus just because it's like I'm a dad now and my birding has changed a little bit, and you know, there's lots of people that are like me that kind of balance birding with like their regular life, and there are a lot of people that don't and just go crazy about birding, but there are a lot of people with really cool stories that I think they should be told on a podcast. So that's kind of what I'm doing. So if you want to look up Birder Dad podcast, that's where I'm going for now. And I don't really like post pictures I take. I'm kind of like a birding purist. I don't love taking pictures for identification, or like I'm not like a photographer. I just like seeing the birds and identifying them and you know, creating memories. So But if you want to, I mean, hit these guys up. They'll connect you with me. I'll take you birding.
For sure.
And yeah, if you want to get some new birds or see a bird that you didn't even know existed that's been in your backyard, like I'll take you out.
Yeah. And when you launch your podcast, we will definitely promote that.
Yeah.
We will let all of our listeners know.
Yeah, we'll do a little back and forth there. That'll be good.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. You should do it. You should do it.
Thanks.
Because it's such a cool world, and I think that like we were saying in the very beginning, you know, about getting outside and building confidence in the outdoors, that can mean anything to anybody. And some people, hunting might not be for you.
No.
I mean, it might not be for you. It comes with its own challenges. It comes with its own rewards, but not everybody's a hunter. You know, like not everybody that's appealing, and that's totally fine. But if you are drawn to the outdoors, there's so many different things. And just this conversation, birding is kind of hunting for birds without killing them. It really is.
Its origins were in killing them. I mean, John James Audubon, he's like one of the famous people that like started identifying all of North America's birds. He just shot him and then identified the dead body. and like the big year competition started out as like, let's see how many different species of bird we can shoot. And then people were like, oh, passenger pigeons are going extinct. We probably, and then they ended up going extinct, which is really sad. But like, they were like, we should probably just start counting them.
Yeah.
And just do the science part, you know, and the ones that taste good, we'll keep shooting them every once in a while. But, you know, nobody wants to eat a warbler. It's like 2 ounces.
Pop it in your mouth. Yeah. You're all done. Feathers and all.
Yeah. So people stopped shooting them and just started counting them, and that's kind of where it came from. So it's kind of fun.
All right. Well, on a send out, I just want to ask one final question, unless Ben has more questions. But where is one place you want to go to bird? Like, well, if you get one choice anywhere in the world.
Because money's not an issue?
Yeah, money's not an issue. Because the only reason I asked this is because I have a daughter, and we just watched Rio. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, Rio has all these crazy, colorful birds, at least according to the cartoon. Yeah. But so I'm curious, as
That's
a birder,
accurate,
what's the one place?
So like the Mecca in the whole world is probably like the northern half of Colombia. It's like right next to Venezuela. It's kind of like just the northern tip of South America. That's where Colombia is, and it has the highest diversity of bird species on the planet as a country. It's number one on bird diversity, and it's like if you go to Colombia as a birder, it's like the 1800s in Africa. Like it's just like you think of like these explorers that were like on the cutting edge, like discovering new stuff. That's Colombia right now. Like new species pop up every, like 3 or 4 a decade. Plus it's just like you can add like 900 birds to your list in like 3 days.
That's crazy.
Like, and my whole life I've seen like not even 300, That's so like crazy. If you want to just ramp your list up and see a dizzying number of birds, just go to Colombia. And there's like a trail that they've mapped out. It would take you days and days to do the whole thing, but the main difference is the reason that it's got such high bird diversity is the diversity of habitats. So like Colombia has an Atlantic coast, it has a Caribbean coast, and it has a Pacific coast. Just because of where it's at.
Yeah.
It's got all these different coasts, all these different mountains. It has the highest coastal mountain range in the world. Coastal being the key word. It's not the Himalayas, but it's hugely steep mountains, and you can go up like every couple hundred feet has like a new ecology where there's new different birds. So, I mean, just the whole, you can talk about it forever, but that's just where that's the place. In the U.S., Southeast Arizona, surprisingly, is like the place to be. There's like a little range of mountains from Mexico that juts up into the southeast section of Arizona, and those mountains have their own like diversity of birds that you can't see anywhere else in the United States. So if you go there, you can get like, normally in the West, we have a really good hummingbird diversity. So we get like, I think it's like 4 species of hummingbird here. In the East, they get 1. But in Southeast Arizona, you can get like 15
that's
different
crazy.
Hummingbird species, like at any given feeder. And there's like these crazy birds called elegant trogons that come up from the rainforest in the heat of summer. Like it gets too hot down there, so they come up to Arizona where it's only like 115 degrees
only,
instead of like whatever they're dealing with down in Central America, and that's like a huge rarity to find one of those in the U.S. So those are cool. There's all kinds of sparrows that you can only see in Southeast Arizona. So that's kind of like the U.S. place. You can go and stay in like a motel, like a bed and breakfast place that's like specifically made for birders, and it'll have like like hummingbird feeders outside and like other bird feeders outside, and they have like a list of all the birds that they've seen that month
That's so cool.
from the bed and breakfast that you can like. It's like a home base for birders. So there's just like a huge community down there, and there's some great places all over. So,
well, awesome.
Anyways.
I have one final question.
Okay.
But before we get into that, I am definitely going to get the app.
Yes.
And while we're out on our hunts, I'm going to start a book. I'm going to start making my
Cool.
list.
Do it, man.
I'm pumped about it.
I want to
This
hear
is
about the
exciting.
lifers. Oh, by the way, that's what it's called when you get a new life bird, a lifer. So, people get like lifer pie sometimes. If you like see a lifer you've been looking for a lot, you go get pie.
That's incredible.
Or,
See-
do a lifer dance.
See, that's the thing is like we haven't even touched into all of the
I
craziness
know.
that goes with birding.
It's a whole world.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a whole podcast
And
series.
that is why
Part
we
3
started.
coming. No, just kidding.
And that's why you need to start your own podcast
Yes.
about
Okay.
birding, because
Deal.
there's enough that we don't know what to even ask about that you would be able to touch on.
Yeah. I'm going to do it. And I think we kind of covered the bases on like if our listeners want to start into this, we talked about the platforms and the
Yeah.
gear and getting into it. Joe is a great contact for anybody listening. We'll patch you over to him. Stay tuned for his podcast dropping soon here. But my final question for you, and it's kind of similar to what Thomas asked. What's your one bird? Do you have one bird that it's like, I will see that bird before I die? I know we talked about the northern goshawk.
Yeah, I was gonna say besides that one, because right now that's like your current quest because
Yeah.
that's possible.
That's like my possible target bird.
Because we talk about this like with hunting, and I'll kind
Yeah.
of rant if you need to think about it a little bit. But like for me, it's like I want to kill a caribou up in
that
Alaska with my bow.
That's like your life
that's
goal.
like the thing.
Yeah.
Like,
See, and I would, the caribou that we've talked about that hunt a lot. Like that would be the dream hunt is to get a caribou because you just can't get that here.
yeah, with your bow.
Those are
And
cool animals.
And
too.
another one is I want to get a bow or a bull elk with my trad bow, my traditional recurve bow. Like
Oh,
that's
that'd be
another
sweet.
one.
Mm.
So like I have these, and I know Thomas does. It's like that's the one, like that's the one. So like, do you have a one bird where it's like before I die, if I need to travel the world, I will see this bird?
Yeah, it's more like a family of birds that are all really localized. Birds of paradise in Papua New Guinea. That's like the holy grail, man.
Yeah.
Um,
Why? Like what is it about them? Are they like super rare? Or are they just in that area? Like what is it?
Yeah, so they're only found most of them are only found in Papua New Guinea. There's some that are like in Australia and Indonesia and stuff, but Papua New Guinea is the place that it's like the bird of paradise, Mecca. There's a bunch of different species of them, but they're just extremely specialized mating rituals. So like if you go like Planet Earth, I don't know if Planet Earth has yeah like
I've seen that.
the
Oh,
Michael
I
Jackson
have
bird
seen
that does a little dance, or
Yeah.
like the ones that like have the weird hood that with like the really really bright colors. Those are in Papua New Guinea, most of them, and
that is the pinnacle for you.
yeah, and they're like very inaccessible. Like you're basically walking through like 6 inches of mud up a mountain in like 100-degree weather, 90% humidity,
Yeah.
getting eaten alive by insects, and then you see this like fluorescent, glow-in-the-dark dancing bird in the middle of the jungle. So that's kind of the thing.
That's awesome.
That's what everybody wants to do. But yeah, it's so hard to get there in the first place, and then just getting.
That's what makes it
into
so
the-
fun.
Yeah. So
That's why it's a list. That's why it's a to-do list.
yeah, I would have thought that it was like unattainable, but like I went to Australia a couple years ago, and I thought that was unattainable. So I'm just like, all right, like I can do it. Like you can get there if you want.
Yeah.
And like that guy that wrote the book about like doing the world big year, he was like, the whole trip, I planned it out pretty good, and it cost me about the same as like a brand new SUV. He's like, so just like get a junker car and have like the best bird watching trip ever.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? Like, just make the sacrifice, and you can make an amazing trip happen. You know, it seems cheap after the experience has been made. You know, what I mean?
Right.
I think that's a good note to end on.
Thank you, Joe.
Right there. Thank you.
Thanks,
Guys, stay tuned for, what are you going to call your podcast?
The Birder Dad.
The Birder Dad, when that gets launched.
And that is that you said that's currently a handle on Twitter.
Yes, it is a handle on Twitter at Birder Dad. So I haven't posted a whole ton on it lately. I'm kind of waiting for the podcast to get up and going. Just waiting on some music and but yeah, I'm gonna have like guests. Pretty much every single episode will be a guest. My whole thing is gonna be like regular old birders, not like scientists or like crazy
Not
world
yet.
record listers.
You'll bring on some world record.
Maybe,
listeners.
yeah.
You create enough
Eventually.
stir, you know.
But the whole point is just to get people's birding stories, like their coolest
Yeah.
birding story. You know, there's a lot of people that talk about like news in the science and like, I don't know, like the American Birding Association does a podcast, and it's all about, you know, cutting edge stuff in the birding community, and I just kind of want to get the regular old people and get them telling their stories. So,
Well, we've heard your stories. We thank you for them.
Yeah.
We're excited. This is cool.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks as always, guys, for listening. As always, if this is something that's interesting you, hit us up. We'll get you in contact with Joe. We'll post about his podcast when that launches, and we appreciate you guys listening. If you have any other questions for us or something that you guys want to hear about in future episodes, let us know about that. We have some other guests lined up that we're really excited about. We appreciate it. We're all about building that confidence in the outdoors. Doesn't matter what that is, whether it's hunting, fishing, birding.
Right.
Today, that's what we talked about. We really appreciate you guys listening. So follow us, share this episode, share it with a friend who is interested in the birding community. And as always, stay safe out there, guys, and take it easy.